What is up? Welcome to the Existential Stoic podcast. Do you ever struggle with who you are now and trying to become something else, but not quite sure how to get there or what you need to change about yourself or what to work on or even being afraid too sometimes of if you become that person, will you still fit in your old world, your old social groups? I think this is a big struggle. So today we're going to talk about reconciling who you are with who you want to be. I'm Danny. I'm here with my buddy Randy. What's up, Randy?
Yo, Danny, or even more than that, is what you're doing enough? I struggle with
Ooh,
that on a
yeah,
regular basis. I
I
always feel like I'm never doing enough, even though my schedule is packed to the gills
yeah,
and I work 7 days a week. I always feel like I'm not doing enough, and I'm like, man, there must have been something that happened in my childhood where it made me feel
yeah.
like I'm not good enough, no matter what I do.
Dude, I constantly struggle with um feeling depressed and anxious related to productivity with how much and it's like a vague arbitrary sense of productivity with how much I expect to be getting, which is ridiculous. And yeah, and I always feel like I'm even when I'm progressing through things, I always feel like I'm somehow behind where I should be, even though I'm where I am. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
I know that sounds
I do.
weird, but it's very, yeah, it's confusing. It's hell hard to
100%.
deal with.
And financially, I feel like I'm always trying to get somewhere that's like this elusive next place that's never here. And it's that next financial goal will give me security and it never does. And yeah.
No, no, nothing ever. Well, this is the problem. I think is you know, we have goals and ambitions. I mean, hopefully everybody has goals and ambitions they're striving towards. Hopefully they're trying to become something more than they are. I think that's part of life. But in the process, you're also defining yourself. You're also making choices about who you're going to be and how that type of person is going to be. Like maybe that's you need to adjust your habits, your character trait, your routine, you know. And I think a lot of times, with that comes those worries about I don't know, can I still manage the rest of my life? Because I think that messes people up too. You start something and you're not gonna have a lot of free time, and then the want to go out and be with people or the feeling that you have to socialize makes you abandon the goal that you're after, the thing that you're after, because you really don't, you're not committing the right time to it. Yeah. God, you can
It's
think
a
about
it's a
something.
really interesting thing because there's this feeling of discontent. And then we go off into illusion. We imagine what could make me feel content in that area. And then we go after that thing. Meanwhile, whatever we imagine isn't going to make us feel content. Like the only way to feel content
No.
is just to feel content right now. But we
Yeah.
imagine this other thing. We do this other thing. We have this other thing. We be this other person. That's going to make us content. We put all this effort and energy into there and then just completely wear ourselves out.
Yeah, it's funny too. It's I sometimes I don't feel this way anymore because I feel like I'm much more what I'm doing is much more authentic and I have a clearer sense of who I am and what I want to be now. Especially age helps. I do think that's true. But I remember when I was younger too, a lot of times I felt like too, what I was doing, pursuing these goals, a lot of times was just distracting myself. Does that make sense? I just kept pursuing these goals to kind of not deal with myself in the
Yeah.
present. And it's I think a lot of people do that. It's more of an escape than a dream or a goal you really want to realize. So when you get there, it's this isn't enough because it's not even really who you wanted to be, what you wanted to become. So you got to keep moving from there. And it's I think, yeah, I think it's hard. I think a lot of us, we need to kind of look inward first rather than outward or rather than those goals, pursuing those
Yeah.
goals.
It's a kind of tricky thing because you can't stop or else you get bored and you know it's you can't stop, but at the same time you can't go too hard because then you burn yourself out and it's no fun anymore. So it's trying to find that happy medium where you can pursue just enough. And it's so hard. Like we were talking about this before the episode today about just how every day we're still working towards our goals, but it's you just can't get enough done in a day where it's satisfying enough to be I really learned it today, I got it. And you just try so hard and it's oh, I'm doing as much as I can and yet still it feels like it's not enough.
Yeah, it's funny, dude. Those days where I honestly, truly go to bed and I'm damn, I got so much done today. This is awesome. They are few and far between where,
Yeah.
where I feel that way. not that I feel bad every day or anything, but like it's just like, it's funny. It's such a struggle. And I don't know, it's so interesting too how like we all seem to struggle with this. And I know me personally too, like I want a lot of things, and like as I've gotten older, like they've gotten clear, which has been super helpful. I'm happy about that because it's gotten better. Like I used to dream about like, when I was younger, I used to want that huge house and I wanted all this money. And as I've gotten older and I've been more aware of the world around me and other people who have been in that position, like I realized that I don't really want that because I also value my free time a lot, my being alone and stuff, and like and hobbies and stuff. And I wouldn't have time for any of that because I realized like that kind of life requires like a 99% commitment of time where you have so little left for anything else. And I also think a lot of people struggle too with this because like they might want to become someone, but then they look at like the requirements to do that. And instead of starting and trying, they get afraid and just, distract themselves with something else.
Well, that's the hard thing because it's like anything that you want is going to require a sacrifice of some type. Like right
Yeah.
now, we're both working on programs, and it's like it requires a sacrifice of a lot of time, and like weekends as well, and doing a whole bunch of stuff in order to get that. And then it's like it literally is a never-ending thing. Like it's
Oh, yeah.
so insane that it's
Infinite.
completely never ending. Like I feel like there's so many areas that I want to learn, and there's just not enough time in the day. And there's just like there's literally a limit to what I can put into my
Oh,
brain.
dude,
Yeah.
you got the core languages, you have all these toolkits and frameworks, and I mean, there's just so much to learn. And then, like, the more I learn about it, when I'm like, yeah, I'm starting to get this, then I look at it, I'm like, oh, I don't know anything. Now I know how little I know. Damn it.
Yeah.
Before I could
Yep.
leave, it's really funny. And, like, it is funny because, like, I knew going into this, like, I knew, like, it was going to take time, commitment. And, like, I think people don't realize, especially with programming too, because, like, you can spend all day learning a lot by getting something wrong. At the end of the day, have something that doesn't work, but yet you might have learned a lot in the process. But it's like, I noticed myself like I haven't gone out much at all recently in the past like 8 months because we've been doing this, and I really want to, and I think that comes with that transitioning career too, right? You want to change careers, you want to do something different. There's a lot of time involved to kind of like learn the thing enough to be able to do it and to get out there and do it and all. And I think it's hard for people. That's the big fear of, even though I want to be this person, getting there, that's the hard part. And that's what I think scares a lot of people off. Or even like,
Yeah.
we talked about like Marcus Aurelius is a great example of like wanting to be a good person and the commitment it takes. I mean, he was emperor, he had everything. And yet every day you look at his journal and meditations, and it's like, the same problems come up again and again, trying to remind himself of the same things, to be patient, to not be angry with people, to not flip out when people do stupid things. It's like the same stuff we deal with. It's really interesting.
There is something because I listened to it on a pretty regular basis, like over and over again. And there was something that I got this week that was really interesting. And it may go well along with what we're talking about. He said, of the things that you have, think about the things that you value the most, and then how hard you would be struggling to get those if you didn't have them.
That's a good one. I like that.
Yeah, and that can kind of be applied to this because it's like we're talking about like struggling to be something other than where we are. Well, like let's take a look at where we are right now. What's the reality of the situation? Well, the reality of the situation is we are wherever we are right now. Now,
Yeah.
what of that is your favorite? Like maybe you really like the way you look, or maybe you really like where you live, or maybe you like some of the toys you have, or maybe you like your partner or your children or whatever it is. Like, what are some of your favorite things? And just think for a minute about how much you enjoy those. And then, like, if you didn't have those, how hard you would have to work and how much effort and energy you would put into trying to get that and just be like grateful that it's already there. Pretty awesome.
That is a really, really helpful tool for gratitude and for just reminding yourself too of like what you already bring to the table. Because I think people forget that all the time too. Like they want to do something new and they see it as like a new endeavor that's like going to require all this, but they also forget that like you're also a person, so you already have skills, you already have certain traits, you already have things you can leverage, so that you're not starting from zero. Like I mean, even this, like going to like programming was a big diversion from what we were doing in our other careers. Yet at the same time, like I know like we both are pretty good in school. We're both very fast learners. Like we're both pretty dedicated once we start doing things. So I knew in that sense, like we had all these like skills and traits that would definitely help us succeed if we decided to do it. And I think, reminding yourself that can be really helpful too when you're trying to
Mm.
become something.
Yeah. Another thing that I've been working on recently is catching myself when I'm caught in comparison. Because like quite honestly, like
Yeah.
I try and get a better perspective in my life, and like my life is comparatively, my life is pretty damn good. But like I catch myself in comparison, like I'll be at the gym and some dude walks in, he's just freaking shredded, and I'm like, oh, like of course, like he has. I want his abs, and I want that person's money, and I want their car, and I want their partner, and I want their brains, and I want their, and it's like, just like I was totally fine until that dude walked into the with his six pack, and I compared myself to him. Totally fine until that
Yeah.
happened, and then just like going on this whole, and it happens all the time. Like I just compare myself in all these instances, and it's like learning to catch myself and be like, no, bad.
Yeah. Well, the major, and that's a good reaction though, because the major fallacy of it too is we cherry pick when we compare. We
Mm-hmm.
don't compare a life to a life. We don't compare the whole person to the whole person. We just point out things that are usually obvious that we can see that they possess that we wish we had, right? And we're failing to see the whole big picture. Like if that guy comes in and he's jacked, he's got a six pack, guess what? He's probably spending quite a significant amount of time on his physical appearance and like
Yeah.
fitness, right? Which is not a bad thing. I'm not criticizing at all, but I think like, honestly, like, do you have that time commitment? Do you
Yeah, but
really like,
also, I mean, his relationships could be garbage. He may hate his
yeah,
job and
that's
his
the other
life.
thing.
He may be, I mean, you never know what's going on other than that he's got a
Yeah.
six pack at this moment in time. Like
Yeah.
there, I mean,
Which can
and
also
that's
be
the
lost
thing.
very easily.
Dude, I had a six pack for like a month once in my life. I worked so hard to get it. I got it, and then I had it, and then I started drinking again, and it was gone. So like,
Oh,
it's
dude, yeah,
something
it's
that's,
impossible to keep if you drink. You can't
yeah,
do it.
it's something for like a brief period in time. Some people have it easier, but like for a lot of people, if you get it, it's a brief period in time, and who knows how long it'll last.
Well, that's the other thing I think we forget too is that we all have, Aristotle said this when he was talking about the golden mean, he recognized that every person naturally has different tendencies. So what the middle is for you is going to be a little different than the middle for me. And I think it's important to remember that too, like genetically, right? We all bring something different to the table. So for some of us, yeah, like getting in shape might be actually not that hard because you have like a metabolism and you have like all the right whatever genes for it, or like doing other things like doing something with your hands. You might be really good hand-eye coordination and dexterity just naturally, and so like you're going to be better at certain things than other people. And I think reminding ourselves of that too is also important because we can do whatever we want, but with our strengths is going to make things a lot easier, and recognizing those strengths and knowing them will make it a lot easier to navigate those choices of what we want to become too, and like how to leverage what we have to get there in a faster way or a better way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
important.
So another thing that when we were talking about this is like how to actually know that you're doing the right thing. Because
Yeah.
I was very confused about that for probably like 36, maybe 36 or so years. Very confused about whether I was
Till
doing the right.
recently, till very
Yeah.
recently, till like yesterday.
Now I
Yeah.
don't really care if I'm wrong about doing the right thing because I enjoy doing what I'm doing. And if I'm wrong, well, so be it. But like, yeah. Up until then I
But
was
I think
just
that
like, yeah.
I was gonna say I think that's kind of it though. Is like there is there a right thing? I don't know. And like, I think it's got to be what's right for you. And I think, you got to get to that point of like, as long as it seems right for you, then who cares? I mean, because how else
Well,
are you
it's
going to judge it?
yeah, it's like being unrelentlessly or I don't being like completely authentic to yourself, but just actually like being your everybody's trying so hard to be a copy of somebody else
Yeah.
that it's like what is uniquely yourself? Like what stuff about you or about your life can you really say like that's me? Especially like the corny stuff. Like for me, it's
Yeah.
painting miniatures. Okay,
Yeah.
it's like the dumbest nerdiest thing ever that I paint these little fantasy miniatures. but like that makes my heart sing when I'm sitting there doing that and I have a movie on in the
Yeah,
background. Like my heart's just singing along, just painting.
yeah,
And yeah, so it's like trying to figure out that stuff about yourself, what it is that makes you feel that way.
yeah. I think stuff like that too is great. Like hobbies like that and stuff are such a good way too to just like be comfortable with yourself and enjoy your time and enjoy doing something that like you like doing, you know? Like I think it's so important. And it is hard, dude, because like I think, we all have ideas of things that we want. And I think, one of the hardest things is figuring out, are those our dreams or are they dreams that have been sort of implanted in us from outside? That's a hard thing to figure out in the first place. And then like, imagining who we want to become, when I thought of the title, I thought of reconciling like who we are now with that. It's like I always felt like that's kind of necessary. Like in order to get to where I want to be, I have to take me now and like you have to transform yourself, right? So you have to like kind of merge who you are now with that future self in order to make that project a reality. And I think like that's always hard too because like it involves all these choices about commitments and time and skills and habits. That means you have to give up other things that maybe don't fit that anymore. And that's always been the hardest struggle for me in this whole process. Is like what really is important, what really does matter, what really fits with the person that I see myself as, so that I can keep making that transition to the, more authentic, real version of myself. Does that make sense? I don't know if it does.
Mm. Yeah, because you gotta see yourself there first before anybody else can see it and before it'll actually happen. You got to see it for yourself and be like, well, what are the steps that I need to take to get there?
I mentioned to you before, I was listening to this study they did on like college, and like, um, and they were talking about like kids from like these underprivileged schools who get scholarships sometimes to go to these really good universities because they did really well, and it's a way to kind of like it's trying to help move them out of the area they're in or whatever. But like I think it's only like it's a small percentage, like 15 or 20% actually finish because and the problem they find is that most of them feel like they're imposters. They don't feel like they belong, and they don't feel like they deserve to be where they are because they're in an environment totally like alien from where they were used to, And I think that is one of the largest hurdles we all face, which is if you cannot imagine yourself, if you don't think you deserve it, if you can't see yourself that way and reconcile your person now with that future self, you'll never get it. You'll always feel like an imposter. You'll always fail.
Well, yeah, that's a big thing is like the feeling like you don't belong there. Or maybe just like even just a little bit of uncertainty. And
Yeah,
I like this book about Steve Jobs, they talk about his reality distortion field, which basically just means he lies to himself and to everybody else and he just believes it 100%. And you see this
yeah,
stuff happen with like I read another book about Donald Trump, Win Bigly. He's the same type of thing, master manipulator, because he lies to himself and other people and just believes it 100%. So it's like
yeah.
if you're able to lie to yourself and believe it 100%, then you're going to do fine. But like for everybody else who may not do that or who maybe uh is just a bit uncertain, it makes it a lot more challenging because you have to find a way to develop that confidence.
Well, it's funny, it is like they've done studies where part of confidence is actually like self delusion and like lying essentially because it's like whether you actually are or are not, able to do something, it's convincing yourself that you can, and then you just kind of get that narrowed focus of I can definitely do this. I just got to keep doing it, and I'll get there. And it's like that really does help a lot. I think people succeed, but it's hard to get to that point of where you're able to do that efficiently. I think. Or
Mm-hmm.
effectively, and it can also backfire too, because you can also lie to yourself in very problematic ways. I think as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. It's fascinating. It's like because it's funny. Like there's this philosopher Jose Ortega, and he's an existentialist, and he talks about like human life is all about imagining what we want to become and then trying to make it happen. He calls it life programs or projects of life, like so that we're constantly in this project of like developing who we are and creating ourselves. And I always like that idea because it is like this endless process, and we're kind of always a work in progress. We're never like a finished work. We all want to be finished. We all imagine a point in time where we're happy and it's done and we don't do anything anymore. But really, the reality is that as long as there's time, you're an unfinished work. You're only finished once that the curtain closes, essentially. And when I first read that, I remember thinking like, oh, it is interesting because we always talk about like the good life and happiness is this end goal, rather than thinking of it as just part of this ongoing journey and process of self-creation that just never ends. We can always
Yeah,
remake ourselves and always change ourselves.
yeah, true. And then like the last, I mean, the final part of it is like the dying part of it. I was thinking about that recently because I was like, damn, that's gotta suck. Like you literally like you're losing your mind, you're losing your physical body, you gotta say goodbye to everything. And then like imagine that if you're like you're in this place where maybe you don't want to be, all your friends are dead already, your relatives don't even bother to come to see you, you're stuck with a bunch of people who are just crabby about dying, and then you got to say goodbye to everything and get yourself ready to die. And it's just like, wow, that's the craziest transition of them all.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that's why too. I think, at least for me personally, that's why like I think, it's so important at least to try and reconcile who I am now with who I want to become, because then at least I think accepting death will be easier if you feel like you've lived a good life, or that you've done what you could and you were yourself. I think that's what people forget about authenticity too. It's like if you could become who you are and be yourself, then you did it. Like you did that. And so you have nothing to regret leaving
Mm-hmm.
this earth, or leaving this existence.
Yeah. Yeah. I have, when I go for walks, I have like this playlist of meditation uh videos. And one of them, the intro of the video is like, if you had 6 months left to live, what would you do differently? And every time I hear that, I think about it. And I think it's very relevant to just think of that on a regular basis. Because it's like, if I really only had 6 months left to live, like what would I do? And for a long time when I first started listening to it, I would be like, oh, I would do this and I would do that and I would do this and I would do that. But now it's kind of just like fine details. Like I'm kind of like, well, would I don't know. Because it's like you get closer and closer to what you actually should be doing.
I think that's a good point. Yeah, it's like the closer you get to who you are and what you should be doing, the less you feel like there's all these things you need to do because you're doing them, right? And if you're doing them now, there's less you would change. But I think it's a great mental exercise too, because like it's a great way to identify like that you're really unhappy with your job or something. Like, because if you wouldn't do that, maybe you should start looking into other things, like, or if
Hmm.
you wouldn't talk to your partner at all in those 6 months, well, maybe you should reassess your relationship, like, and I think we constantly forget that like we can remake ourselves. We can always become a different person. We can like that's the cool thing about being a person, right? We can always create ourselves in new ways. It's just figuring out which way is the right way. And I think and then you're good.
Yeah. Yeah. And here's another thing that I heard. There was this guy who was diagnosed with cancer, and it was a very like short time period of cancer, one of the ones that only lasts a few months. And he was saying how like immediately when that happened, all of a sudden the normal, mundane, everyday became so significantly valuable. Like all those moments that you don't think about, like when you're brushing your teeth, or when you just step into the shower, or when you're just walking out of the front door of the house, or like all these normally mundane moments that we just completely pass by. All these things became so immensely important because he knew that he only had 90 times left to do that. And that was it.
That's really cool though. I like that because you always hear like I've always heard that like I remember when I used to teach biomedical ethics because a lot of that's focused on like death and the end of life and terminal illness. There's a lot of accounts where people talk about things like that, either like the mundane becoming very valuable and seeing like, and also just like seeing the beauty in things that you don't normally see. This like heightened awareness of the value of their existence. And it is sad. I think that's something we forget all the time. Like we forget that like it's pretty cool we're here. It's pretty cool we're alive. It's pretty cool we can do the things we're doing. Like it's pretty amazing we have all this stuff, all these options. Like, we forget this all the time. We focus on like what we're dissatisfied with being man, like down and like we forget all the amazing things. I mean, like, dude, the fact that it doesn't take 6 months to get, you know, across the country anymore, or however the hell long it took back then, probably a lot longer than that. or
That you
you
didn't
can
get
actually,
dysentery and drown
yeah,
when trying to ford the river on the
or
Oregon
like to
Trail.
go, to go across the world. You don't have to worry about running out of fruit. So you get like scurvy, right? I mean, you can just get on a plane and be anywhere in less than a day, pretty much. I mean, like we forget how, I mean, that we can access any information instantly. I mean, there's so many things we can do that we just forget about and like, or take for granted. And I think maybe that's it. They stop taking things for granted, like because they realize that they don't have time anymore to do that. That's
Mm,
like kind of the catch-22 with time, right? It's like we think we have all this time, and that works against us because then we're not grateful, we're not aware of what we have, and we waste it. But if we focus only on the end, that also stresses us out, causes anxiety. So it's like you have to find this balance of like recognizing that there's time and recognizing that everything takes time, but that there's also like it's the journey that's what matters. It's the value is in the doing the things in an active life, right?
mm. Yeah, and it's like choosing the things that you actually want to do.
Yeah, yeah, the hard part.
Mm, yeah.
And I
And then
think,
being
like,
okay, and then
yeah,
and
yeah,
then
go
being
ahead.
okay when you can only do so much of it.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
that's like my big thing right now is like I want to be able to do more. Like I want to be able I have like an extra 2 hours a day that's technically free, but like my brain just can't hasn't been able to function yet to do that. But I'm like I've been forcing it. I'm like, come on, I can learn to, and it's just it's just being
no,
okay
dude,
with what I'm able to do in a day.
I've been trying to stop doing that because like every night I would like, get settled in the bed and I was like, well, I'm still kind of awake. I could read a programming book for a little while or something, which I do enjoy reading them. It's actually fun, but like, at a certain point, like your brain just doesn't take in it doesn't retain any more information. Like it just can't. Or I have the reverse effect happen too, where like I'll start reading something and I get interested in it and then it wakes me up. And
Mm,
then like the
yeah.
next day is bad because I don't sleep well. And then it's like, so it is just recognizing, like, hey, it's just a day. You did stuff today. Let it go. You know?
Isn't that the crazy thing is like recognizing that these bricks do kind of pile up to make a wall.
They do. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's
But
hard to see it.
we all wanted to like be a wall made in one day.
Well, it's because, I think the problem is I think when we start, especially like these lifelong projects, when we're doing things like this, or like starting these things that we know are going to take a lot of time. Once you start and when you're in it, you don't see, you're not like aware of the progress every moment of the day. Sometimes it feels like you're stalled, sometimes you plateau, and it's like trying to get to that end. It's like it's not clear how long it'll take, so it's just you want it now. And it's like you're not building a wall, so you don't have that physical representation all the time of like this is the end goal. Like 'cause I know with myself, like doing like the programming stuff. Like I know, like in a certain sense, we will never be done learning because there's always going to be new technologies coming out. We might change focus just for the heck of it later. You never know. And like because of those things, like you'll probably always be in some state of learning indefinitely. And it's like so because of that, there is no like here's the wall done. And I think that makes it hard too with a lot of things.
Hmm.
It's like when we talk about like a good person, like what is a good person? It's like, well, couldn't you always do more? You could always be better, right? And it's like, so what's the metric that says, or the threshold where you cross it and now you are good. Now you are this. Now you are that. It's like it's very hard to tell.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of just like doing the best you can every day. And then being okay with that, being
Yeah.
contented.
I
Yeah.
think part of it too is like, also reminding yourself that once you start the journey, you are that type of person. Like once you start trying to be a good person, you are a good person because you're trying to be a good person. Once you start learning programming, you are a programmer because you're learning programming. Like reminding yourself that in a certain sense, once you start building the wall, you built the wall because
Mm,
you're in the process of building it. Like recognizing that the end and the process, there's no real clear separation between the two. So, they are connected.
mm. That's a good point. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, it's really weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the other thing I've been struggling with this too is like and I think this is just with any goal, but the anxiety that comes too with trying to do something you want, and like, kind of like, it's so weird too, because like such an abstract anxiety. It's like I'm not like necessarily worried that I won't be able to do it, but I'm still anxious about that. And like, the fear of not being good enough, the fear of like, or the worry about like, you know, even though I love doing something, learning it, will I really like doing it? All of those worries and all that up and stuff. It's very hard.
Yeah, it's like trusting yourself that it'll work out. I remember there was a Wim Hof did an interview with Tim Ferriss, and I just remember like the end of the show, the one thing that he said to sum it all up. I think Tim was like, "You have anything else to say?" And he's like, "Yeah, have faith. Just have
Yeah,
faith." And it's like I keep hearing him say that over and over and over again because it's just like, I mean, here's a guy who's done a lot with his life and a lot with spirituality and everything like that, and he's basically like the one thing that he says other than "breathe, motherfucker" is have faith. So like it's just like and it's like learning to develop that in yourself. Like remember how a couple weeks ago we did that episode on the 5 regrets of the dying.
yeah, yeah.
So I wasn't like I know that those are important, but those didn't really like resonate with me. So what I actually did after that was I imagined myself on my deathbed and I was like, what are my 5 biggest regrets in life? And so there were things like I wish I didn't waste so much time trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
And like I wish I let go of my grievances earlier. Uh but like one of them was I wish I had developed an unwavering faith in myself at a younger age.
Yeah.
Because it's like,
Yeah.
could you imagine what would you would be capable of doing if you just had like this unwavering faith in yourself? Just be like, hey, listen, I may not get it the first time, but I know I'll figure it out. And even if I don't figure it out, I know it'll be worth it. So I'm just gonna go for it.
Yeah. Yeah, like it does. I mean, at certain times it doesn't matter, right? I mean, we all have the capacity to do it if we just put our minds to it and do it. So, like, having that faith is, and it's essential. It is. It's necessary to have that faith, and that's one of the things I think most people struggle with is a lack of faith in themselves. Sometimes I wonder if it would, you know, back when like religion was more like a facet of everyday life, like back in more ancient times, I guess. I always wondered if it was maybe a little easier because they always had that the faith that like the god or gods or whatever would like handle things and like that things would work out because there was that thing there, that like governed how things happened and like it was kind of out of our control or out of our hands a little bit. Because now it's
Yeah.
like it's placed on you,
Mm-hmm.
the individual, and like faith in yourself is essential. It's like, I think confidence, faith in yourself, they go hand in hand. And
Yeah.
sometimes I think to your point though about those regrets too, I always tell myself like like there's a part of me that wishes like I didn't waste so much time doing other things. But at the same time, like I got to where I am now, so that's cool. Like I'm glad I got here. And I don't know if I would have gotten here had I not done those things. I don't know. Like that's the other funny thing with life
True.
is like we are a kind of the culmination of our past experiences, our choices, all of that. So if you're doing what you want to now, maybe now is the right time for it to happen.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, we can all wish we had more time doing it, but obviously, like that would have been nice.
Yeah. All right.
Because then I think about it, I'm like, well, I'm 40 now. If I had started this when I was like 18, man, I'd be kicking butt now. It'd be so much easier. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's easy to think those types of things, but they're never true.
Mm.
It's like reality is something crazy. Like this book that I talked about before, Loving What Is, she talks about money in there and she's like, you always have the exact amount of money that you need. Like it's just this illusion, this lie that we tell ourselves that we need more or less. Because I've experienced that in my own life. Like theoretically, I have more money now than I did when I was younger, but I don't feel any more security from it. Like it's
Yeah,
it's not like it's gotten me any closer to this goal that pursuing money has supposed to have done for me.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny too, is the pursuit of money. Like I've seen a lot of people, what happens too is as their income goes up, so do their costs. So they don't
Hmm.
actually have any more money, literally no more, because instead of buying the same $100 jeans they were buying before, now they're buying $500 jeans. And it's like, well, you just made everything that you purchased 5 times more expensive. So even though you're
Yeah,
making
right.
5 times more, you're just as broke as you were before.
Yep.
It's like,
Yeah.
it's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's because I
anything
think,
else on? Oh.
Oh no, I was just
Anything
gonna
else
say, I
on
think
it?
like stop lying to ourselves about things, right? You
Mhm.
know, that's part of it. Part of reconciliation is to kind of just see things as they are and kind of accept them.
Yeah. Huh. I think that's a good question to ask yourself. Like, if this was all you were ever going to become, would you be okay with it? And if it's not, you better start moving. Get your butt in gear.
Start doing something different and do it now. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. No, I think we're good. That's good. Yeah. You got anything else on that?
Yeah,
All right.
I'm good. My brain's empty at the moment.
That's fine. It happens. No problem. Yeah. So I think that's it. So, how to reconcile yourself now with who you want to become. This is the Existential Stoic Podcast. Check out our quick fix later this week. Watch on YouTube, listen wherever you get your podcast. Please like, share, subscribe. It helps us out a lot. And until we talk again, later, Randy.
Later, Danny.